So here goes a continuation of our notes, a little more in depth on tissue types. So starting off with an image, can you tell what tissue type this one is? What's kind of interesting is, or notable, is the striping pattern. This is one long cell, but what's also strange about it is it has multiple nuclei. So these are multinucleated cells in this particular tissue. The striping pattern is, well, if you looked at the internal composition of the cell, you'd realize that there are cross-bridging proteins that crisscross and anchor into some other cytoskeleton of the cell and allow this cell to contract. So if I say it contracts, you hopefully think muscle tissue and movement. So muscle tissue is all about producing some kind of contraction of a cell or cells and resulting in movement. It might be movement of a part of the body, the whole body, or something moving through the body. Worth noting too that a muscle cell is called a muscle fiber. When looking at muscle tissue, there are three varieties. The one that we think of the most is probably skeletal muscle. That was the picture shown previously. These striations, these multinucleated cells, and then these cells come in bundles. We will explore those or this a little more closely with that system, but muscle tissue, skeletal muscles are voluntary muscles. That means that we can think about using them and consciously aware of using them. And they attach to our skeletal system. Smooth muscles look a little different. They only have one nuclei. They're not as long. And they don't have the striations. They would line our blood vessels and our digestive tract. And then cardiac's only found in one place in the body, and that is the heart. They have striations, and they also have these cross branches. And so cardiac muscles need to have a little tighter signaling ability so that there's a uniform sending of signal to pump that heart continuously. So here's a summary of skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Cardiac also is involuntary. We don't have to think about our heart doing its job. It does it all on its own with the help of the brain. They also are striated, but they are not multinucleated like the voluntary or skeletal muscles. So get this summary in your notes and then move on. It's a different type of tissue. There's some resemblance here of connective tissue, but they've got these branches coming in to a cell body with a nucleus, and then a long extension leaving. So most of what you would see in a neuron. And neurons are nerve cells. So we're looking at nervous tissue. Nervous tissue, again, all about communicating throughout the body. Communicating between other neurons or other types of cells throughout the body. Might need information to do something or might take in information to the nervous system. When we think of neurons or nerve cells, hopefully you think that maybe there's a little variety in them. So just like in muscle tissue, we see different types of muscle fibers. There are different types of neurons, 3 main or primary kinds. You will notice though that arrow indicates that the message sent through the cell only goes in one direction. So there is the input area of the cell and the output area of the cell. Sensory neurons take information from your senses, bring it into the central nervous system, spinal cord or brain, and then the interneurons decide what to do with it. Motor neurons are the ones that bring messages out from the central nervous system to the rest of the body and signal your body to do something in response. We'll learn more about them when we talk about the reflex arc in the nervous system unit or chapters. So again, sensory, associative, and motor. Associative neurons are also called interneurons. So when you see associative, note that interneuron is referring to associative. And I'm using abbreviations here. I haven't introduced this slide yet, but CNS stands for Central Nervous System. So your skin would act as a receptor. Your ear is a receptor. Your eyes are receptors. There are receptor neurons in your eye taking in information. Skin neurons taking in information. And then let's say you grab something hot or something pokes your skin. Sensory information takes that in, and then effectors would be like a muscle pulling your hand away or causing you to check and see what that thing is that's poking you. So that would be effectors. Usually skeletal muscles are oftentimes. This is just a breakdown of the 2 signal types, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. And in lighter color are peripheral nerves that come off the spinal cord, and you have cranial nerves that come off the brain. And a peripheral nervous system contains the bulk of your sensory and motor neurons. The central nervous system contains your interneurons. So, good basic information to understand when you think of this tissue and where it is in the body prior to when we take a more deep dive into this system. You should know the basic anatomy of a neuron too. fact that these things are called dendrites. This is a nucleus, which is easy to identify. The cell body is the part of the neuron that contains the nucleus. And then the exiting part of our nerve impulse follows this part. This is the axon. And then these would be axon terminals, where the part of the axon terminal where it interacts with other cells, these are called synapses. So there's a little space between the neuron and the next cell. And then these are some supportive cells that help protect the neuron axon because it's long and skinny and vulnerable. It also helps speed up the nerve impulse going through it. So these are called Schwann cells, and they collectively call it myelin sheath. And so these special cells kind of wrap around and coat the outside of the axon. They'd be an example of glial cells, because glial cells are nerve tissue support cells. So know that neuron anatomy. Here are just some examples of other types of support cells in the nervous tissue. So we mentioned the Schwann cells making up myelin sheath, oligodendrocytes, microglial cells, ependymal cells, we haven't mentioned those yet, and astrocytes. I think astrocytes are these two are probably more commonly referred to one other than Schwann cells. So if we were to target 3 glial cells to remember, I would target the astrocyte, the microglial, and the Schwann cell. And that's a wrap for our tissue type deep dive notes in chapter 4. We will have probably one final section to get through and be done with the chapter and focus on maybe taking a quiz.